This is George Stalk. Good morning, and welcome to the Innovation Forum. We use these forums as an opportunity to showcase innovative thinking on strategy and on strategy execution. And we're fortunate today to have professors Raphael, Amit, and Chris Zott. Rafi's from Wharton. He's got a long history of researching and teaching and consulting on business model innovation. Rafi's also a fellow at the SMS, which is where I've met him and have had many great conversations with Rafi over the years. Christoph is a professor at IESE in Barcelona. His research has also been centered on business model innovations and design. And when he's not teaching, consulting, or speaking or writing, he's an Ironman competitor. So Rafi and Chris are also co-authors of a new book published in 2020 by Jay Wiley, called Business Model Innovation Strategy, Transformational Concepts and Tools for Entrepreneurial Leaders. And today we're going to hear many of the highlights from that book. Christoph?
Yes, hello everybody. Well, thank you very much for this nice introduction. Thanks, Sharon, George, and Will for inviting us to speak today. It's really a great pleasure and an honor to speak in the Strategy Innovation Forum series. And we would also like to thank all of the attendees for the privilege of having your time and your attention in the next hour. As you all know, the SMS tries to bring together academics, business people, and consultants, the so-called ABC. So we would like to extend a special welcome to all the B's and C's among you in the audience. And accordingly, we've been receiving the brief from George, from Sharon, and from Will to present some cutting-edge ideas to you, but in a manner that is understandable. And so here we go. So we have designed our presentation for an executive audience, so this is how, the context in which you should receive our slides. We will probably speak for about 40 minutes, and the ideas that we present are anchored in our research, as George has said, in our teaching and in our consulting work. And recently they've given rise to a book, which is called Business Model Innovation Strategy, which is also the title for our talk today. So I'll begin sharing the slides with you now. And the way we have organized this is that I'll, for the first half of the presentation, by way of explaining a little bit the phenomenon in which we are interested, and then explaining to you our basic framework for business models, for what is a business model. And then Rafi will chime in and explain to us what is business model innovation in particular. And then finally, what is a business model innovation strategy and why do we need to have one? The Q&A will be at the end, so please, if you have any questions, of course, submit them during the talk. They will be noted, and it will help Sharon, kind of organize the Q&A at the end of our session, which will be the last 15 or 20 minutes. So let's go. Let's go with a short video clip on a company called Let Go. And we have put this video clip here at the beginning of the presentation, in order to highlight to you the phenomenon about, in which we're interested in, what we're trying to explain.
Dude, you gotta let it go.
I've had it forever.
And?
I guess that's it.
Okay. We'll sell it on Let Go. You just take a picture and post it. Hey. I'll take it.
It's time to snap, post, chat, and sell. It's time to let go.
So Let Go is a company that was founded in 2015 that quickly got to 100 million downloads on the iStore. One of the co-founders is a graduate from my institution here from IESE Business School. His name is Enrique Linares. It was acquired in 2020 last year, about a year ago, by a company called OfferUp. And what they're doing is, this is like next generation type eBay. They're really kind of about how to do retailing and how to sell used goods in new ways. And they bring kind of this eBay idea to a new level by using artificial intelligence. So you saw this in the video clip. You just kind of hold your camera on the item, and the artificial intelligence will categorize it. So it will take over many of the steps that you would have to do yourself in eBay. Then it also uses your location in order to connect you with potential local buyers of the things that you want to sell, in order to speed up the transaction time. Combined with OfferUp, they now have 20 million active users in the US. And what's interesting for us in this example is that they're really, the whole idea is about new ways of doing retailing, supported by technology to connect buyers and sellers. And so these new ways of kind of doing business, how do they come about? So what we've seen, sorry, I'm going back. What we've seen is in the last, let's say 20 years, 25 years probably, has been a paradigm shift from the old manufacturing world, a world in which we still had linear value chains, in which boundaries were clear, in which there were sequential steps. The customer was at the receiving end, and when you were thinking about boundaries, you're probably thinking about make or buy decisions, focusing on one transaction at a time. And of course, what we have witnessed is a change to a much more networked world with open boundaries, with network value structures, where the customer is moving more towards the center. And the question is not about how to optimize an individual transaction, but how to evolve the entire system of activities, and by doing so, be relevant in responding to actual customer needs. So, if you look at this, then probably the downside from a managerial point of view is that managing in this world certainly has not become easier. It has become more challenging because now you need to think, in much more systemic ways. You need to think about partnerships. But the upside, of course, is that, this kind of new combinatorial explosion of connections and of network structures gives you great opportunities. So what has brought about this unfreezing of structures? Well, the answer, of course, is the internet stupid. It's digital technologies. And many people speak about digital technologies very fondly in the context of what they call digital transformation, as if it were an end in and of itself. But we look at digitization more as an enabler of new ways of doing business, of course. And the way that digitization enables is by way of reducing transaction costs significantly, sometimes down to zero, between different parties, between buyers and sellers, between suppliers and firms. Then the second thing that it does, that it gives customers much, much more power in terms of giving them more information, in terms of enabling them, giving them bargaining power. And the third thing that it does, of course, it enables completely new ways of new types of interactions. And all of this has led Joe Katerra, who is the CEO of Siemens, in 2016 at the SMS meeting in Berlin, when Joe Katerra received his Lifetime Achievement Award from the Strategic Management Society, to say that digitization is the most profound and disruptive development in the history of mankind. That's a very strong statement. I mean, he added that it eliminates elements in the supply chain, and he also said, we, Siemens, better not be that element. So it's a profoundly disruptive shift. And what makes it so disruptive, partly at least, is that digitization brings about new business models. So what do we mean by business models? The business model perspective is a holistic perspective, colloquially speaking, let's say, on how firms do business. It emphasizes activities, not products, not organizational functions, but activities. So when you put the first two bullets together, holistic perspective and activities, it's clear that business models are about activity systems. They are about the whole. And we talk about the business model of a company, certainly, But what we're witnessing, by way of open boundaries and the importance of partnerships, is that these business models have become boundary spanning, spanning firm and possibly also industry boundaries. With respect to innovation, the Strategy Forum is a place where we talk about innovation. Business models probably could be said to fulfill two important functions. Number one, every product innovation, every new product needs a suitable business model to allow for sufficient value creation and value capture. So that's number one. Number two, the interesting thing to Raphael and me is that business models in and of themselves can be a source of innovation. So in this context, we would like now to reflect briefly on how COVID-19 affects these trends. Does the pandemic make these kind of points more or less salient? And for that, we have a little question for you, a little poll, which I would like to ask Anna to launch now. Anna, are you ready for the poll? Very good. So here are the two questions that we would like to ask you. First question is, do you believe that the crisis triggered by COVID-19 will drastically change the ways you do business in the next 5 years? Simply answer yes or no. And the second question, are you preoccupied with COVID-19's lasting repercussions on your customers' wants and needs in the next 5 years? Again, please answer yes or no. These two questions are questions that were also asked in a recent McKinsey survey that was then published in June last year. And I will show you the results of the survey, but I first wanted to see your responses, and then we'll compare how your responses compared to the answers from 200 CEOs of leading companies who were also asked these two questions. Let's see, maybe give it a few more seconds. And then Anna maybe can display the results of this poll. Anna, can you? Would you? Okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so here we go. So we have 80%, 80-20. Consultants will be happy. Here we got the 80-20 rule. 80% think it will have a lasting impact on how they do business. And then there's also a 2/3 majority almost that believes that customers will change their behaviors in the long term in significant and enduring ways. So thank you very much. I'd like to close the survey. Keep these numbers in mind. It was almost 80% and then 63%. So how does this compare to the manager's response? First one was, how does COVID change the way we do business? And it was even more, 90% believe it will have a profound impact on how they do business. And then 85% also thought that this will have lasting repercussions on customer behaviors. There were two additional questions, and that's interesting too, which we didn't ask you in the interest of time. The third question was, do you have the expertise, resources, and the commitment to successfully go after the new growth opportunities? Because of course, what our challenges are also opportunities, and 20% said no. 20% said yes, 80% believe that they don't have enough skills and expertise. And then there was another question, which was, do you believe that the crisis will be the biggest challenge you will ever face in your executive career? Well, that's very speculative, but 2/3 thought that was the case. So how does COVID affect those trends? Well, it reinforces them. It makes them more salient. It seems to make them more important. Business model innovation seems to become an ever more important topic. Hence, we believe that COVID, in fact, gives us an opportunity. Of course, it presents us with enormous challenges, but it does give us at the same time opportunities to reimagine and reinvent firms, companies, and in terms of how they do business. The role of new technologies is the enabling role that we talked about. We also see entire ecosystems shift, for example, the retailing space. That bullet doesn't want to stay. Maybe now. Okay, so you see, this was an animation that shows how the ecosystems are really, really, really jittery and how they and how they do shift. Joking aside, last point is that it does these developments do have implications on firms' competitive advantage. For example, by way of new entrants entering new industries very, very swiftly with different business models, incumbents having to fight back, not knowing exactly what to do. But certainly it seems to be strategically important. So that's why we believe this is a topic not just in entrepreneurship for new firms and think about new business models, but also for strategically for established companies that think about how should we change. In order to kind of provide you with an example of a company which is not an internet company, but that has come up with a business model innovation in a very kind of traditional industry and construction business, we'd like to show you another video clip. This company is called Katerra. It was founded 5 years ago in 2015 by Michael Marks, the former CEO of Flextronics. It's been funded to date with $1.2 billion in venture capital, primarily through the Vision Fund. And this video is a little longer, so it's about 2 to 3 minutes, but I think we think it's very informative. So sit back and enjoy.
K90 is a project where we're taking a building from slab up to the keys to our customer in 90 days.
To try and take our traditional build, which stands in the 120 to 150 day range, down to 90, and then even lower through continuous improvement.
K90 is our endeavor to do construction differently.
We want to bring in manufacturing principles and control the environment similar to the way a factory would be run.
One thing we've tried to do is really advance how we handle our material logistics.
So on K90, material delivery doesn't stop when the material comes to the job site. We take materials all the way to the installation point to get a higher utilization out of the workforce.
We, of course, make use of our materials audit app and audit dashboard. What that does is it gives the team a heads up of exactly what materials are coming and when they will arrive.
Some of the innovative products that we're using out here are bath kits and wire and wall. The idea of the bath kit is everything you need to assemble a bathroom, be able to do it in a matter of hours. And so all the materials come traded up within the kit.
One of the things that makes K90 possible is a higher level of completion coming out of the factory from our own products. An example of that on K90 is doing electrical wire in the wall panels as they are delivered at the job site. That allows us to expedite utility roughing in the field and spend less labor hours in the construction environment.
One of the things that differentiates this job site is the advanced planning that went into it. We have every single activity on site by every single person planned to the labor hour and the duration.
We have an opportunity here to look at every single step of the construction process. This isn't just about building a building in 90 days. This is about changing the way we do business and changing the way we do construction. And the only way we can do that is the amount of data collection that we do throughout the process to drive improvement down the line.
The Apollo Construct platform gives us a better feedback mechanism and connection to the other organizations in our company. Throughout the entire company, there have been people dedicated to this project, and it's become a wide web of skill sets to do this. And getting everybody engaged in a common goal has really driven a better product out of the company.
Very good. So you've heard this clip and you've seen the clip. And let's reflect briefly on what makes this company different. What are the new ways of doing business that they have been referring to in the video clip? And we use this example in order to introduce our basic framework, business model framework, which we call the what, the how, the who, and the why framework, because these provide us with 4 buckets of categories that we can use to describe what's going on in terms of activities and activity system. First question is the what question. And here what we understand from this video is that Katerra is in fact, performing all of the traditional, let's say, activities that are performed in the construction industry, architectural design, the construction itself, the manufacturing of parts, and they contract directly with owners. So, in terms of activities per se, there's not much novelty here, perhaps, other than that they try to connect everything through technology and integrate everything. But, if you want to consider that an activity in and of itself, the big difference is, of course, in the how, kind of that all of these activities are linked through proprietary technology, which they developed to make the whole process more efficient, ease of ordering, tracking, manufacturing, construction. They integrate the entire logistics network, even product sourcing at a global level, and so on and so forth. So that's the second dimension, how activities are linked. So first question is what activities secondly are being performed. Secondly is how are these activities linked. And then the third question, and you see, this is about a good example of a network structure. The third question was about the who, who's performing these activities. And here we see the big novelty here. It's a one-stop shop. It's Katerra that is performing all these activities instead of individual players, which is still the case in most other construction sites. So they do everything. They are the manufacturer, they're the architect, and they're the on-site contractor. And why? So what does this bring? Why, what's the value logic of all of this? Number one, faster, they're faster. So this is about time savings. Number two, cost savings. And number three, higher quality. So with that kind of example, we can introduce our framework for thinking about business models as a boundary spanning system of interdependent activities that centers on a focal firm, yet may encompass activities performed by partner suppliers and customers in the pursuit of value creation and capture. So if that is too long for you, then just need to remember 4 questions, which are, the what question, what activities are being performed in the system, how are they linked, who performs them, and what is the value logic, the why question. And so this is the figure that we use in order to highlight our framework with the associated questions. And what's important to us is to understand, to emphasize that these questions are not about anything, and this is not what anything. So, but this is about what activities. It doesn't, not how anything, but how are the activities linked, and who conducts the activities. So these questions are tailored and need to be specifically asked regarding the activity system. We have another example here for you, which we'd like to show briefly. And this example is actually inspired by the recent SMS keynote talk from Ali Parsa, who's the CEO of Babylon Health. Those of you who attended the Monday morning keynote talk at the SMS London, you probably remember that. It's a company that was founded in 2013. It's to date has a $2 billion valuation. And its chief purpose is how changing the way how people access healthcare. And another short video clip to illustrate the logic of this business.
Psst. Do you ever wish you could just skip the line and see a doctor right away? With the Babylon app, you can do just that. To get started, download the Babylon app. Once you're all signed up, you get 24/7 access to doctor appointments. And to make things easier, you get your prescription sent to a pharmacy of your choice, so you can grab your medication whenever you like. You can use the Babylon app for most health concerns, including questions about COVID-19, managing asthma or diabetes, contraception, colds and flu. You can even get therapy for anxiety and depression. You can also check your symptoms, like this, and explore your health right from your phone. Simple, right? Say adios to long wait times. No more pulling the kids out of school. No more taking time off from work. Get 24/7 care whenever you need it with Babylon. Download the Babylon app to speak to a doctor now. Doctor appointments are available through the Babylon app at no cost through select health insurance plans, including select Medicaid plans.
So again, the high-level idea of this business model, it's about video consultations. It's anchored on the idea of video consultations driven by artificial intelligence. And we can dissect the innovation a little further, the business model innovation a little further by thinking about the 4 dimensions. Namely, first of all, the what type of activities are new. And the new activity here is that, they provide healthcare services via the mobile app. They have this artificial intelligence as an interim step to field frequently asked user questions and to pre-screen the most often asked questions. And then, of course, the new activity is the online consultation services. So that's new. What's also new is the link the direct link between the patients and the doctors 24/7. You can do that through a subscription model. You interact with either with people or with a chatbot, and you can even get monitored. Then the third question is kind of who's involved here. So internally within Babylon, you've got scientists, engineers, doctors, and specialists who are working on this. But the interesting thing here is that Babylon Health is partnering with governments, with NGOs, pharmaceutical companies, and insurance firms. So this is truly boundary spanning, spanning firm boundaries and spanning industry boundaries. And then the purpose, also very interesting here, is not just about making money, which is often said, which should be the chief purpose of a business model, but it's not. I mean, the purpose of the business model here is to create social wealth, is to change this notion of sick care to a notion of health care, and to give patients better and more accessible care, based on a very preoccupying data point that about half of the world population doesn't have access to healthcare. So this model is currently being rolled out in the UK and also in Africa, in Rwanda. And of course, it does have other benefits as well, but I think those are some interesting benefits in terms of the why. So what I've done so far is I have illustrated to you the phenomenon in which we're interested, business model innovation, given you some examples. And I've also kind of shared with you our basic framework, the what, the how, the who, and the why framework that helps you think about business models in a fairly comprehensive and parsimonious manner. And I would like now to hand over to Rafi to explain to us with a little bit more detail what is business model innovation, maybe give us some more examples to help us understand the power of business model innovation, why it's so important, and then to end up explaining to us what is a business model innovation strategy and why we need one. Rafi?
Thank you.
Okay.
Will you let me?
I will stop share here.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Chris. So as Chris suggested, now that we know what a business model is, let's understand what business model innovation is. So a business model is innovative when it is novel to the product market into which it is introduced. So let us take some very well-known companies. Take Airbnb, for example. Airbnb disrupted the hospitality industry without having any real estate, right? They don't own any buildings, right? They have a digital platform that matches those who want to rent some short-term space with those who are interested in renting it out. And so if you think about it, and without elaborating because all of us are familiar with it, Airbnb is worth north of $100 billion today. They basically have a digital platform that matches those buyers and sellers of space, if you will. Hilton Hotel is worth less than 1/3, about $30 billion. And they own all these hotels around the world. Right? Take Uber, for example, another very good example. Here's a company that didn't innovate a new service. I mean, taxis were around for a long time, moving people from point A to point B. But the innovation has multiple dimensions. It's the way in which this service is provided. And that's a digital platform, again, that Uber has that matches buyers, those who wish to get a ride with those who can offer a ride in their own car. So Uber doesn't own any cars, right? It doesn't have any drivers on its payroll. They're all contractors who use their own cars. So again, Uber is worth more than $100 billion. Ford is worth around 38 billion, right? So it shows you that these are two examples that show how business models per se can disrupt established industries. Another example that I think all of us are very familiar with is Netflix, showing how we can show how the business model is a competitive tool, right? Netflix didn't have a new product or a new service. It's just the way you rent out a CD when Netflix was originally established was different, right? They used a digital platform where people could choose what CDs they wanted. They picked it, they chose it, and then Netflix mailed them 3 or 4 CDs along with a prepaid return envelope. Well, that took Blockbuster, who was a dominant player at the time, out of business. They filed for bankruptcy. So business model innovation, namely changing the way you do business, is a very, very powerful competitive tool. Now, how can one innovate the business model? Christoph went through these 4 dimensions of a business model, and indeed, one can innovate the business model along each and any one of these dimensions. You can add or eliminate activities, right? Change the content, add novel content. You can change the way these activities are linked or sequenced, right? That would be novel structure. You can change the partners who participate in the business model. That would be novel governance, or the who question. Or you can adopt a new revenue model. That would be a novel logic of a business model. It is important to note that innovation in business model content, structure, or governance, or value logic are highly interdependent. So let us look at one example of one company that innovated the value logic of the product.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are great. Each razor has stainless steel blades, an aloe vera lubricating strip, and a pivot head. It's so gentle a toddler could use it. And do you like spending $20 a month on brand name razors? 19 go to Roger Federer. I'm good at tennis. And do you think your razor needs a vibrating handle, a flashlight, a back scratcher, and 10 blades? Your handsome-ass grandfather had 1 blade and folio. Looking good, pop up. Stop paying for shave tech you don't need. And stop forgetting to buy your blades every month. Alejandro and I are going to ship them right to you. We're not just selling razors, we're also making new jobs. Alejandro, what were you doing last month?
Not working.
What are you doing now?
Working.
I'm no Vanderbilt, but this train makes hay. So stop forgetting to buy your blades every month and start deciding where you're going to stack all those dollar bills I'm saving you. We are DollarShaveClub.com, and the party is on.
Right, so I hope you enjoyed that video, but it shows you that the innovation here is basically moving to a subscription model. So let us now understand what are the fundamental 6 questions that one has to ask oneself when you think about business model innovation. First, not surprisingly, what customer needs will the business model address? Then we go through what novel activities could satisfy those needs. How should these novel activities be linked in novel ways? And who should perform activities? What novel governance arrangements can be found? And then we go to the value logic. Will that business model create value for each and every stakeholder? And obviously, from the standpoint of the focal firm or the innovators of the business model, what revenue models can be adopted in order to complement that business model to enable value capture? So it's not just about value creation for every stakeholder, it is as much about value capture. Now, obviously, incentive compatibility issues need to be thought through very carefully. So let us show you one example that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with, maybe customers are using that company's product already, and that is Apple. So if we look at the original business model of Apple, Apple basically designed the hardware, engineered the software, then contracted out to contractor, to vendors, to manufacture the parts. Those parts were assembled at Apple plant, and then Apple sold these neatly designed, very nicely designed, expensive gadgets to customers through any one of the distribution channels, right? Either the stores or other third-party distributors. That was the original business model of Apple. Enter 2001, Apple introduces the iPod. Apple introduces a digital store, iTunes, an online store, and introduces partners, new partners, namely the owners of the IP to records, and convinces them that it's okay to sell individual songs digitally rather than entire CDs. So the innovation here is that they added new partners. They complemented the product innovation in a way that allowed Apple and its partners to benefit from the use of the product. The old business model, once they sold the product, that was it. No more value creation. Yet, once that business model has been modified, now Apple sells an expensive product, but also benefits substantially from the use of that product. Apple continued to innovate its business model along the same line, added movies, and it's the same idea. Again, people had to download that through the Apple Store, and Apple benefited each time. Apple continued to innovate its business model. In 2007, they introduced the iPhone, the App Store. Every time you use an app, Apple enjoys additional value that it's created, but also the new partners, the app developer, benefit greatly from that business model. So the main idea here is that the business model allows value creation to all these stakeholders, but also enhanced value capture for the innovator. Let us see if capital markets pay attention to that. If you compare if you look over time at the revenue trajectory and the net income trajectory of Apple, you can see what happens following the introduction of the iPod and iTunes, and then later on the iPhone, and then the iPad, and so on and so forth, right? So that has been, if you look at capital markets, look at the trajectory of the stock price of Apple relative to S&P 500 as a result of these innovations. I think it's important to compare also Apple to another company. It's a Taiwanese company called HTC, which produces innovative products, very innovative products, very high-end products as well. But HTC struggled as the business model remains centered on products, right? So they have great razors, but they don't have those blades. And look at how the stock price of HTC relative to the stock price of the S&P 500 and the stock price of Apple behaved over time. I think the chart speaks for itself. So now, having talked about the business model and having talked about business model innovation, let's talk about business model innovation strategy. So the starting point, and that's important, and we can come back to that, the starting point of crafting a business model innovation strategy is a business model mindset. A business model mindset is really a state of mind or perspective that helps executives consider the firm's entire activity system as a way to capture business opportunities. We can elaborate on that if there's interest. We adopted a design perspective to the crafting of a business model innovation strategy. And it starts, the first element is the design of an activity system. You will see that we anchored the design perspective on the ideal product design framework, and we applied it to the context of business model innovation. So the business model strategy is the pattern of choices that executives make with respect to A, the design of the business model, B, the processes and the antecedents, if you will, the drivers by which the new system is designed. And thirdly, and very importantly, the implementation and ongoing adaptation of the business model to both to the internal environment as well as to the external environment. And we'll explain that in a few minutes. So clearly the business model innovation strategy has to be anchored on market needs. And when we talk about those market needs, what does that mean? It entails recognizing the problem that all the stakeholders, not just customers, have, and then addressing what activities should be carried out, who should conduct these activities, how should those activities be linked, and why do they create value and enable the capture of value. So that is the end result. As I said, and I will elaborate on that now, the ideal design system we anchored our design perspective on the ideal product design methodology. So when we think about designing a new business model, we can't do that in abstraction. We have to do that in the context of the internal and external environment in which the firm operates. Now, so there are drivers, and what we did is we summarized those drivers, the design drivers, using the acronym DESIGN. So what does DESIGN stand for? It stands for deployable resources, external environment, stakeholder activity, incumbent templates, goals, and perceived needs. So these are the design drivers within which the business model design process takes place. And as we said, the design process itself draws heavily on the ideal product design methodology, but we adopted it to the business model. So for example, when we think about business model ideation, it refers to observing and gaining a deep understanding of business models that are currently in use and the needs of all the stakeholders who might be involved in the design of the business model, and so on for others. So this design phase happens within the context of the strategic design drivers within which the design process itself takes place. And the design process output is, of course, the business model itself. So we have those three building blocks. We start with the design drivers, we then go through the design phases, and the output is the business model itself. Now, once you design that business model, it is important to talk about implementation of the business model. And here the focus has to be on both internal fit and external fit. So the internal fit obviously has to fit with the internal organization. There has to be strategic fit with the product market strategy, with the corporate strategy, and there has to be a fit with the ecosystem. So for example, if I have a novel business model that relies on 5G communication, and the 5G network in the United States has not been fully deployed, then there is no fit with the ecosystem within which the business model operates. There's a strong case for a business model innovation strategy. We suggest that the business model innovation strategy is a core strategic choice that corporate executives and entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs, need to make. It complements both corporate strategy as well as business strategy. So while in the past we always focused on the corporate strategy, on the business strategy, on market entry strategy, and so forth, we suggest that executives have to very carefully look at this core strategic choice, namely the crafting of a business model innovation strategy. So let's look at Disney very quickly as a case in point. So in the case of Disney, you know, over the last 10 years, there have been all these streaming services that have been introduced to the market. Disney was very slow in realizing the power of digital distribution. They viewed digital distribution as cannibalization of their own business. But when the kind of cord cutting trend occurred, when people no longer use cable TV, that was the trigger, and it took them a long time, and they were one of the latecomers to the digital distribution. So ESPN Plus was only introduced in April 2018, and Disney Plus was only introduced in November 2019. So it's really, really important to pay attention. The promise of business model innovation goes beyond the economic value creation, value capture. Using scalable business model innovation enables companies to tackle large social problems. A Grameen Bank, for example, or Aravind in India, an eye care system, they performed millions of cataract surgeries using the McDonald's model for eye surgery. So a business model innovation can help us chart a path into a better and brighter future for all. And with that, what I'd like to do is end and open it up to your question. I want to point out that we have a website, bmistrategy.com. On that website, we have syllabi for those of you who want to teach a course on business model innovation. We have cases to match every chapter in our 12th chapter book, in recommended cases that we think fit those chapters. And very importantly, those who adopt the book will have PowerPoint complete with videos and notes and other material that go along with each of the chapters of the book. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. Maybe I'll get out of this, Sharon, and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Rafi and Chris. You did an excellent job challenging us to focus on the business model as a unit of analysis instead of the more traditional products and services or resources. We have a lot of great questions that have come in, and so I will try to pull the themes together to get us started. One of the interesting questions was around barriers to imitation. Can you address this larger issue of how you create a business? What are the barriers to imitation that might be available for a competitive advantage that's based on a business model?
Chris, you want to take it?
Sure. So Rafi and I and our co-author Julia Snehor, we have a paper forthcoming on this very issue in Strategy Science, which talks about imitation in the context of business models. And so I would say the following: it may appear obvious what a business model does and what a business model innovation is, but often you don't really see all the details. So, the front end is visible, with the customer facing end of a business model is visible, but the back end is often hidden from view. So it's not that easy to really figure out what's the activity system behind, a particular business model and of a particular company. It's very difficult to get information about activities. You can get information about products, but then information about activities and how they all hang together, that's another thing. And then even if you have that information, it's very difficult to copy an entire system. Even if you had the information about a very powerful new activity system. For example, Zara is a Spanish clothing retailer, which has been phenomenally successful over the past 30 years. I mean, year on year, they've been doing extremely well. And so if people begin to understand, what's behind their success, so they begin to understand, wow, it's kind of how they do business. And Zara itself is not shy of saying that, what they're really good at is having innovated the business model, because what they're doing is imitating other companies and designers' products. But then for an existing company to do what they have done, that would mean changing everything, right? And how do you change everything? You have already an activity system in place as an established company, right? So you've got suppliers, you've got relationships that may have grown over, many years. That is not easy to change, okay? So I think the question of imitation is a very valid one. We need also more research on, imitation and imitation barriers and all that, because we don't have enough. It's a great area for research, but I think we have a suspicion, both Raphael and I, that business model innovation can be very powerful precisely because business model innovations are probably hard to copy for the reasons that I just mentioned.
Just complementing what Chris said, go closer to home. Look at Walmart, right? It's a case that many of us are very familiar with. Kmart tried for years to copy Walmart. To this date, they couldn't. They're actually in bankruptcy as a result. So copying an entire activity system when some of the links are not that transparent and some of the activities are not that clear is difficult. And the proof is in the pudding.
And related to that, we have a number of questions that are about how important novelty is. So very similar. So Costas Markades, David Collis have some questions around when we say a business model innovation is different, a way of doing business, how do we measure difference? Some innovations are more novel than others. Does the degree of novelty matter? And then, similarly, David Collis makes the point that, for example, is offering a distinctively more reliable dishwasher a new business model? Is having only female drivers a novel business model? Is only selling through service dealers a different model than selling through mass market retailers? So, kind of differentiating how important is that innovation, that difference piece, and then the difference between a business model and maybe an entrepreneurial strategy.
So maybe I'll start and then Christoph can take over. So we actually have a fairly simple definition of what we consider business model innovation when a business model is new to the product market. So we highlight when the business model is new. So when you add another feature to your product, that's not a business model innovation. That's a product improvement. So the trick is that when you make a change in, say, the link, how business models are linked, or the content of what, it has ripple effects throughout the entire model. And when that model is new to the product market, whether it's a big innovation or a small innovation, it's still an innovation that creates value. And it's sometimes difficult, as we just pointed out, to imitate that. Chris,
thank you. Those are great questions, obviously, and we don't have the definitive answers. If Costas doesn't have the answers, how can we expect us to have the answers? We don't have them, Costas. But we can probably give a crack at your question and the other questions. Number one, we all know innovation is a matter of degree, and for most companies, innovation is, they call innovation when they do something different. So it doesn't have to be new to the world. It doesn't even have to be new to the product market space. But if they do something that they haven't done before, they call it an innovation. So, you're right. We always have to define precisely what we mean. And of course, the bar goes up, the more you require that something is new to the product market space or even new to the world. Secondly, how to measure business model innovation. It's not that easy. Obviously, we have some measures that Raphael and I developed in our empirical work, which is kind of they are published in academic articles, and we also kind of have a part of this in our book chapter. We use a mixture of qualitative and quantitative, but mostly qualitative measures. And then the last point I also wanted to highlight is kind of, we're giving the definition of the business model, but it's important to us also to state what a business model is not. As Raphael said, it's not a product and it's not a collection of products. It's not an individual process. It's not an activity, a single activity. It's not the firm either. So, otherwise we would not need this construct. We wouldn't need the notion. It's not a business plan either. And it's not the business model canvas, because there was a question in the audience. And so how is this different from the business model canvas? The business model canvas has, as one of the 9 fields, the notion of activities. And I think that's what we're focusing on. And it has many other useful fields. So what we view the business model, we use this as a complementary tool. Once you have an idea about a new business model, how to turn that into a business plan and then into a business, we see that the business model canvas can play an important role here, also within the context of the lean startup method, where it's often used. But certainly, our 4 questions, the what, the how, the who, and the why, are not as encompassing as, for example, the fields in the business model context, because they're really centered on the firm as an activity system, and so much more focused.
And I want to be mindful of everyone's time. There's a lot of really terrific questions. So for those of you who have questions that we didn't have a chance to engage around, I would encourage you to reach out directly to Rafi and Chris if you want to continue this conversation. I know they're very interested in your feedback and ideas. A huge thanks to Rafi and Chris. It was a really engaging presentation, and I thought you did a terrific job of presenting it in a way that it resonates with our academic audience as well as our executive audience. As George mentioned at the top of the hour, one of our goals at SMS is to create vehicles for our academics to engage with our executive audiences in terms of moving strategy and strategy ideas forward. And I thought this presentation did a really terrific job at that.